I'm Meta Gorup, and I'm one of the co-editors of the book Why the World Needs Anthropologists. I'm speaking today to Joana Breidenbach, who is the author of chapter 3 in the book, and the chapter is titled, What is it like to be an anthropologist? Hi, Joana. You started out popularizing anthropology, and then you turned a social entrepreneur, and I will ask you about that in a bit. But to begin with, I wanted to ask, what was it that first attracted you to anthropology?
Well, I started out at university with studying history of art, and I liked art as a lens onto the world because it is also a perspective a bit from the margin. Mostly artists are people who are not, mainstream society, but they sense and see some signals which other people don't. And I think that perspective, I found that amplified in anthropology. So why I was attracted to anthropology was basically because my then boyfriend, or maybe even not boyfriend, but lover, now husband of, I don't know, how many decades, he actually suggested to me that I visited an anthropology class. And I was immediately really inspired by it. And I think an aspect which drew me to it was that I had the experience of growing up in a very conventional, traditional, German family. And then I went to boarding school in the UK and I experienced punk and I experienced this very rough, very different youth culture there. And that gave me a very early, in teenage years, a very early view onto the world, that the world can look so very different depending on where you are at any given time and moment and what your, social, cultural, whatever perspective is. And I found that freedom to not be stuck in a certain mold and not to live my life in a certain way, but to be able to really explore it from many different angles and in a way have multiple lives through that change of perspective. I found that really fascinating. And I think that's, one of the main cores which attracted me to the discipline.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I wanted to ask in my next question, because in your chapter, you mentioned multiple characteristics of anthropology that you have been drawing on in your career as an anthropologist. And some of the things you mentioned are multi-perspectivity and suspended judgment. And then there's a list of other ones. So I wanted to ask you, in your work as a social entrepreneur in the field of digital social innovation, what were the features of anthropology that you found most helpful or were the most important?
Well, I think, there are many, but maybe if I want to pick out a few, I think one of the main aspects was that when I studied technology and when I looked at digital communications, I didn't only see the technology and the hype and the narrative which came with it from the media and from, the technologists and the companies themselves. But I was in a way naturally disposed to look at it much more contextualized and much more see, okay, what are the effects? How are people actually appropriating technology? What are they doing? How are they changing it through their usage? And also to look at digitization not only in a deterministic way, but to look at what are the more subtle cultural signals which come with this new technology. And there I found things like, that the world is becoming so much more decentralized, that it's becoming so much more fluid and flexible, that it is this continuous change which we really see in the world, and which is, of course, the world is always constantly changing. But in digitization, we see it really very materialistically because, there's a constant update of things and nothing is really static. And to look at the world through that lens and ask myself, well, what does it actually mean for how do we live our lives? And how do we, in my case, I've been very interested in new ways to lead companies, new ways to work together, to collaborate, organizational structures. What does that actually mean if the world is undergoing such a shift from, the industrial age into the digital age? And yeah, in a way, I think this an awareness of more subtle cultural changes, which in a way are much more deeper than just, if we were to look at the technology, is one of the things which I think anthropology contributed.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to ask you about Dasda, which is one of your current undertakings. And in the book chapter, you mentioned that the mission of Dasda is to build a new operating system for the society and the economy. And I was just curious how that was progressing and especially what your role has been in that as an anthropologist.
Yeah, I must say, I mean, our vision, and I think I stated in the chapter, I say that we are right at the beginning of this. And now, a few months, years on, I feel that our original vision hasn't really materialized. I mean, we really wanted to be an amplifier for impact-driven companies, which are really building the new companies and organizations for the next economic paradigm, which is not extractive anymore, but regenerative, which is repairable, open source, sustainable, all of that, what I think needs to happen in the world. And we discovered that really money is simply not there. We are still stuck in a world, even though the rhetoric is very much that we need to build this world in a more sustainable way within planetary boundaries and all of that. That really, when you look at the investment streams in the startup area, you see that really startups are just one little node in the big financial system, and that is so much optimized just to generate maximum profitability, that the aim of doing good or creating companies which are good for profit, people, and planet is really hard to come by. So there's a lot of rhetoric, but it's actually people are not, putting money where their mouth is. And so what we've discovered is that at the moment, what we are doing mainly at Dasda is looking at organizational transformations, and we are looking at how can we actually build companies in a way which are, from their structural aspects, more holistic. And that is mainly, at the moment, it's mainly a publication effort. So I've written a book together with a friend and collaborator, Bettina Rollo, on New Work Needs Inner Work and the importance of an enough personal human transformation in order to create the kind of outside innovations which we all want to see. And at the same time, I must say, part of our original vision hasn't materialized. And, that's how life goes, and that's fine. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that, I guess, brings us actually to my next question, the inner work that you mentioned. So at the end of the book chapter, we ask you to provide some tips for young anthropologists. And I liked one of your tips, especially because it was so different from everything else in the book. And that is, you advise anthropologists to start meditating. So I wanted to ask, why meditation, and how has it helped your work?
Well, I find that meditation strengthens a certain capacity in us humans, like a muscle, which I feel we really need in order not to be overwhelmed by our complex world. And what it does, it creates a kind of a distance between, a detachment between myself and all my senses and what I see in the world, the emotions I experience, the thoughts I have. It prevents me, or it creates this distance that I don't identify immediately with whatever I experience, but that I have this perspective on it, and that I can see, oh, these are thoughts which are going through my mind, but I am not those thoughts, but because they are constantly changing. Mm-hmm. So meditation, in a way, gives you the freedom, because it creates a distance between you and your sense perceptions. It creates a freedom to stop and to then maybe react differently, and not to take whatever happens so serious, but to see it as constructed. And many of the thoughts I have are not thoughts which are important right now, but they are, because I've been traumatized as a child. Yeah? So then these thoughts come up, and in order to not just be completely taken by them, I find that for me personally, it has been a huge liberation to have a meditation practice. And the same is, I think, the anthropological perspective, because it asks us also to distance ourselves from our immediate maybe judgment and ideas which we have about something, but to look at it and to seek to understand first, and then engage with it. And to have, again, also that liberty to see culture and the way how our world is as being constructed by many, many different kinds of forces, which is really is important that we disentangle them, and that we take those also into account. And these are, power structures, cultural dynamics, all kinds of different inputs which come to create our reality. So I feel it really gives you freedom, and also it makes it possible that you act on the world, because you are not consumed by it completely.
Great. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I like the connection that you made between meditation and anthropology.